Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 342. The more that you take distribution into your own hands, the better chance you will have to actually making any money at all. Mongo Wilder.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, my Indie Film Hustlers, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Today's show is sponsored by Indie Film Hustle's Filmmaker process. We provide filmmakers with professional services to get their films or series funded, finished, and distributed. Some of the services we offer are pitch deck creation, film budgets and schedules, domestic and international sales estimates, legal contract templates, consulting, post-production services, script coverage, professional trailer editing, poster design, film deliverables, and production payroll. To learn more, go to www.filmmakerprocess.com. Today's show is sponsored by Music Bed. As filmmakers, we're always looking for songs and music for our projects, but it's such a pain in the butt to license and go get music, and it's just been a nightmare. But Music Bed has changed all of that. You can download a single song, get unlimited music with a subscription, or even create a custom song or score from scratch. They already have over 20,000 songs, beautifully categorized, and their catalog is growing every single day. If you want to check it out, just go to indiefilmhustle.com/musicbed. And because you are Indie Film Hustle Tribe members, you get 1 month for free to try it out, or 20% off a single song purchase. Just enter the promo code IndieFilmHustle. Now, today, guys, is an episode. It is a crossover event with Film Entrepreneurs podcast because this is arguably one of the more important podcasts I've done in quite some time. This guest is going to hopefully save a lot of filmmakers a lot of pain. Today's guest is Naomi McDougall Jones, and she is one of the filmmakers behind the independent film Bite Me, which is a subversive romantic comedy about real-life vampires and the IRS agent that audits them. Now, what's incredible about this story is what they did and how they went about trying to make their $500,000 budget back. Now, they have no bankable stars in the movie, so there was going to be a little bit of an uphill battle to be able to recoup that money. And then when they went down the road of trying to find a distributor, they were just so disheartened by the horror stories and how the system is literally rigged with most distributors, not all, but most distributors. And that whole model, that whole legacy model of traditional distribution is kind of set up to screw the filmmaker. I hate to say it, but it's the truth. There are really, really good distributors out there like Indie Rights, which I highly, highly recommend. And there's a couple other ones, but generally speaking, every distribution company I've dealt with, other than a handful, have been just horrible. And Naomi really wanted to kind of do something interesting. So they literally went on a tour around the country, and they called it the Joyful Vampire Tour of America, where they rented an RV, put some fangs on it, and went around to city after city like a carnival and showed their films and sold their wares, sold their ancillary products, made money with their movie, and were in complete control of the revenue coming in. And their bravery of what they were trying to do and this entire crazy journey was documented in this must-see, I repeat, must-see documentary series called The Joyful Vampire Tour of America, where they literally, as if I may quote her, they pull their pants down and show the good, the bad, and the ugly of everything. They're completely transparent with all of their numbers. If they screw up, they let you know. If they make money, they let you know what they could have done better, what could they have done worse. They interview other filmmakers and their processes in the series. It is an amazing must-see series for anybody wanting to make a movie in today's world, and specifically if you're going to try to self-distribute your film. A lot of the things that we talk about in distribution, even 6 months ago, 8 months ago, a year ago, is obsolete now. Everything changes so rapidly. You know why? Because the industry is trying to figure it out. Everything is changing so quickly. The consumer's changing so quickly. Everything is changing so quickly. We got to try to figure out ways for independent filmmakers to actually make money. And Naomi was wonderful. She's a wonderful guest. She completely is transparent with everything and drops knowledge bomb after knowledge bomb after knowledge bomb, with also a few inspiration bombs as well. So I'm not going to talk anymore. Without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Naomi McDougall Jones. I'd like to welcome to the show Naomi McDougall Jones. How you doing?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being on the show. I greatly appreciate it. You guys reached out to me and I heard about your craziness and I said, I need to, you're insane and I love it. And anytime I meet insane filmmakers who are good insane, because there's crazy insane, which is just like, I've lost my mind. I'm an egomaniac. And we've met those filmmakers.
Yes.
But you're a good kind of insane, something ambitious. You have audacity. I love that.
Yes.
You had an audacity. I'm like, we're going to do this. Watch. So I felt it was a perfect story for a film entrepreneur, and because you are a film entrepreneur without question, you are a definition of film entrepreneurship without question. So before we get going, I want to know, tell me a little bit about your film Bite Me and how it came to life, because we're going to talk a lot about this film.
Sure. So Bite Me is my second feature film. I wrote it. I was one of the producers and I star in it. Mm-hmm. And it is a subversive comedy about a real life vampire and an IRS agent who audits her.
Now, when you say real life vampire, it's like someone who identifies as a vampire? Yes.
So there is a real global community of people who identify as vampires in real life. Well, you say, of course, but not everybody knows this.
I mean, I'm hip.
You're very hip.
I'm very hip that way. Yes, yeah. I've seen, because when you say vampires, like, because people might think is this like Interview with a Vampire? I'm like, no, this is not. This is like, these are people who are in the lore. I mean, I had a lot of goth friends in high school, so I am aware of this.
So some portion of that community believes that they need to drink human blood to stay healthy, and they do through donors. So the genesis of the film was wanting to write a really great romantic comedy. I love romantic comedies. I'm really sad that the genre has taken such a horrible nosedive.
No, well, ever since Nora Ephron left us.
Yeah, I know.
She was so wonderful.
Like the early 2000s, it's just been terrible.
It's been pretty.
So
rough.
Anyway, so I was trying to figure out, like, how do you make something smart and edgy and well written and feminist and just like a well-made movie that is also a romantic comedy. And I found out about this vampire community, and those two ideas kind of smashed together. And
well, I mean, I heard this when I saw the trailer. I'm like, well, this is genius. Like, and the reason there's the IRS agent is because they are trying to identify as a nonprofit because of their religion. Or how does that work?
So vampires would tell you that vampirism is not a religion. It's a fact of their lives.
Sure,
it's an identity. But the vampires in the film have registered as a church, basically for tax reasons.
Right.
Possibly to scam the government slightly.
What?
So they get audited at the beginning of the film, and that sort of sets the whole story in motion.
I mean, seriously, that just alone is hilarious. I mean, just that concept it's a very high concept film, which is great. Yeah. Now, the other thing that I found interesting about this is that you guys raised a lot of money for this film. I mean, I know it's considered in the world of studios a low budget. Some of them would even argue to say it's a micro budget. I wouldn't call this a micro budget, but it's a low budget film. The budget, from what I've read, is $500,000. Correct?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
That is a lot of money for a romantic comedy with no marketable quote unquote actors in it. So first of all, how did you raise the money for this kind of project? And then we'll talk about how we're going to get the money back. Okay.
So I had made my first feature film, Imagine I'm Beautiful, on a true micro budget scale for $80,000. Mm-hmm. And that we had crowdfunded most of that and then kind of cobbled the rest of it together through some small investments. And then, we made the film and it won a bunch of awards on the festival circuit. That film actually even got a traditional theatrical distribution deal.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show. And there are things I love about true micro budget filmmaking, but we wanted a bigger. Yeah, well, fair enough. You want to eat. I get it. You want some time to play.
Able to pay ourselves and people and things like that.
Bigger toys to play with. Got it.
Yeah. So we felt like having demonstrated that we could do that with 80,000, that we could go out and raise the $500,000, which we did over a 3-year period. It took us 3 years to raise the money.
Yeah.
Which is, as from the face you're making, it's brutal.
Well, yeah, because how many filmmakers do you know are still looking for that money to drop? Any day now, that investor is going to drop that money. Totally. And you look at the clock and you're like, oh, wow, 5 years have gone. Oh,
totally. And it's brutal because during that period of time, there's no guarantee that it will work, right? Because you also know that, right, there are filmmakers who are like 20 years into this and never have found the money. And
a day before the money will will go away.
Right. Yeah. Right. So it's just sort of like this sheer willpower of yourself and your team to keep going and the belief that this will eventually work out. So we did raise, we used the New York tax credit. So we took out a loan against the 25% New York tax credit towards financing the movie. And the other 75% we raised through equity investments from private investors. We raised it from around 20 investors. So it was a matter of cobbling together smaller investment amounts.
Okay. So that makes sense. And the tax credits are a huge deal, especially I had another New York filmmaker on the other day. And they were saying, I hear New York is a wonderful place to shoot. I hear they're just super open, and now I think it's like $300. He told me that for all permits, like you could shoot.
Yeah, the permit. Anywhere. I know, but everyone assumes it'll be everyone always thinks it's really expensive to shoot outside of New York, and it's actually the cheapest place you can shoot.
And has the most production value.
Yeah.
They're really open because everyone here at LA, I mean, you need a permit to shoot in your house.
What?
Technically, you need a permit to shoot in a house. If someone calls you, like if you're shooting a little movie in your house, and if the neighbor doesn't like it and calls the cops, you will be ticketed and you will have to go to court and pay a fine. Oh, that's crazy. Because we're in LA. So that's why you assume all big cities are like that, and they're not. LA's murderous to
Although, funny thing, so we have a scene that takes place in Central Park, and what we learned about Central Park is that you don't have to pay extra for the permit. However, you do have to convince the people in charge to let you shoot in Central Park. And they've segmented Central Park into a series of tiny little fiefdoms. So even if you're shooting in a really relatively small area, you have to go convince like 5 different people to let you shoot on their patch of Central Park.
It's just basically like lords of the manor, if you will. Yes. Like little fiefdoms, like you were saying, lords that you have to convince. Oh, so Lord, can we shoot on your grass?
Right.
It's free, but we just
Yeah, but we need your blessing, so please, maybe.
Wow, that's super weird.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. That's actually hilarious. Okay, so you're shooting in New York. You're shooting this movie. Now, I had to ask you a question. Did you ever consider trying to cast a more marketable name or a more marketable, traditionally marketable name in some sort of parts which would make it easier to sell a film of this budget range? I'm just curious.
We did. I mean, I think realistically, for $500,000, unless you're friends with that person, it's virtually impossible to get bigger actors than we got. Okay. I think we certainly had ambitions to do that. And I feel like you always hear these stories of like people getting so-and-so for this tiny film. And I feel like underneath those stories, they're almost always
a relationship
or related to those people before. because the problem, of course, is not the actors, it's the agents. And so of course we put offers out to bigger people, but I'm almost certain that their agents never gave it to them because they don't want Daniel Radcliffe doing this film when Marvel might call at any moment and pay them 17 times the cost,
right?
fee,
And if you're offering him, let's say $50,000 for a day, the agent's going to pull in a little bit of money off that. They rather pull in off the millions and stuff like that.
Right.
And that's something that independent filmmakers, even listening to this or watching this, are not aware of. This, like, agents, there's so many guards or gatekeepers to some of these actors. So, like with my first film, I had an insane cast, but they were all friends of ours, and they were all oh, I'll come out. I'm in LA. Yeah, I'll come out for the day.
Yeah.
And these are people who've been in big, huge movies, but they were all friends. So it really does help.
It makes all the difference so I'll tell you a really crazy story. So our cast, as we'll probably talk about in a moment, are not like A-list actors, but are named actors in a sense. Like they've been on stuff.
Their faces, they're recognizable.
Mm-hmm. So one of those actors I had actually written the part in the film specifically for, and we reached out to her. Through our casting director, we submitted an offer to her agent, and I had actually written a personal letter explaining this, with the offer, and we hadn't heard anything. And I was like, this agent has not given her this offer. I just had this feeling. And so we had a mutual friend, and I asked the friend if she would just be willing to forward my letter to this actress, just to make sure she'd gotten it. And within about half an hour, this actress called me and was like, of course I want to do this movie. Nobody's ever written a part for me before. Like, are you insane? And her agent had not given her the offer. And she had to call her agent and be like, hey,
what's up?
What is going on? And they were like, oh yeah.
Sorry.
And then they were incredibly obstructionist, like the whole time trying to make a deal with her.
Oh, absolutely. There's two quick acting stories. One, that same thing happened. Quentin Tarantino, when he was doing Pulp Fiction, submitted for James Woods, and James Woods' agent didn't give it to him. And then after the movie came out, James Woods met Quentin, and Quentin's like, yeah, I sent it to you. I'm like, what? And his agent never gave it to him. And he was pissed.
Sure.
And there was another story of some filmmakers who, this great story, they actually went to a film festival, and Ed Harris was speaking. After the talk, they bum rushed the stage, jumped on the stage, and they had a DVD player, portable, this is a while ago, DVD player, and showed him the trailer for their film that they were like a sizzle reel that they had shot. Yeah. And they literally went into the back. He's like, come follow me. And he went into the back alley to smoke. And they told him his whole story, that I want you to play the part because you would be playing our alcoholic father and all this. And Ed Harris said, yeah, I'll do it. And Ed Harris, if you remember, doesn't do independent films. Like he's one of those actors. He never did it, but he said he was going to do it. Everyone at CAA was just trying to torpedo that left and right. And it was Ed that said,
sure, I'm
doing this, guys. So make it happen. So unless you're able to get direct access to some of these actors, it's extremely difficult.
It's impossible. Well, because the agents are directly disincentivized from allowing that to happen. Have you heard about Bill Murray's hotline?
No. Please tell me about Bill Murray's hotline. Oh, please.
So Bill Murray does not have an agent and refuses to have an agent for this reason. So Bill Murray has a hotline number that you can call, that anybody can call and leave a message pitching their project.
No.
And then from there, so I read this story once written by a filmmaker who had eventually gotten Bill Murray to be in his movie this way. And he said, so he called the hotline and he left a message with the pitch. And then like 3 months later, gets a call from Bill Murray being like, can you meet me in LA for lunch tomorrow? And the guy was like, no, I can't. I'm so sorry. Like, I'm in New York. And Bill Murray hangs up the phone, click. And the guy is like, no, what? And then 3 months after that, Bill Murray calls him again and he says, can I pick you up at LAX in like 12 hours? And the guy was like, sure.
Yes.
Fine.
Yes.
And so he gets in an airplane, goes to LAX. Bill Murray picks him up in the back of a limousine. They drive around for like 3 hours, or the driver drives around for 3 hours. They talk about the movie. Bill Murray says that he'll do the movie. And then they drive him back to LAX to drop him off. And the guy is like, can you just like write on a napkin or something that you agreed to do? Like, I have no proof that this happened. Nobody's ever going to believe that this happened.
Right.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And
what did Bill do?
I don't think he wrote it down, but he did do the movie eventually.
Wow. That's amazing. But you have to, but how do you get this number? I'm not going to promote it, but I'm just curious. How do you get
I
this?
think you can Google it. Like, I think it's just
it's
available.
a thing. It's just a thing.
Yeah.
I love Bill Murray. I just absolutely love Bill Murray. He is like the coolest human being.
The coolest.
I mean, amazing. Okay. So did you call Bill Murray? You should have called him to pitch this.
There wasn't a role for him, you know.
He could have played the female vampire. He would have so done it. All right, so you've raised $500,000 to make this romantic comedy about vampires. Now, when you were doing this, did you have a niche audience in mind? Did you figure out like, okay, we're going to target this group of people? Because I'm assuming the vampire community itself is the people who identify as vampires is fairly small comparatively to the general public, but people who like vampires is a fairly large niche audience. And then there's horror fans and people that actually it could spill over to. Was that a thought process?
Oh, very much. And actually circling back to the casting conversation, that we were very intentional about how we cast based on the audience, even though we weren't able to get bigger actors. So our working hypothesis was that our audience was going to break down into two groups. One, we lovingly term the mega nerds. Hey. So like people who, which I
mean, I have a life-size Yoda behind me. So
I just clocked that.
It's a safe space. Is this a safe space?
Yeah, safe space. So people who play D&D, people who are LARPers, people who are mega sci-fi fans,
Comic-Con guys.
Comic-Con, that sort of thing, with the vampire angle. Mm-hmm. And then secondarily, people who love romantic comedies. Mm-hmm. But we figured that we needed to be a little bit more specific with that group. So we figured people who love romantic comedies and also Harry Potter, because the film is very much about sort of the feeling of being an outsider and wanting to be seen and accepted. And so we felt like the people who were at the convergence of that were going to be the right people. Interesting.
So that was just a demographic, I'm assuming in like direct ads and things like that is what you're talking about, to target these people.
Right. So we didn't test that at the time. We tested it before we released the film, and it did prove to be correct. But I am a person who likes romantic comedies and Harry Potter quite strongly, both. And so we figured that was a pretty good cipher.
Mega nerd. Got it.
Yeah. So, and also the film has an almost entirely female creative team. The lead character is a super badass, edgy female character. And so we figured also we wanted to go after people who liked that kind of edgy feminist content.
Now, how did you target them? Through like Facebook ads and things like that?
Through Facebook. Yeah. So when we eventually released the film, we had a number of marketing, tactics. So we did do the Facebook ads direct.
Okay.
And then we had slightly different messaging that we marketed the film as to those groups. So like for the mega nerds, we pushed the vampire angle more strongly. And for the rom-com people, we pushed the love stories angle more strongly.
Interesting. And that actually, because I always preach, and as a film entrepreneur, you're like, you have to niche down, mm-hmm. and understand who your audience is. So I find it interesting, like, because if you're going to try to reach romantic comedy lovers, that's too large of an audience. You don't have the resources to do that. But when you combine the Harry Potter romantic comedy area, it niches it down, mm-hmm. but it's not a niche that you would conceive normally. It's like, and that's an interesting concept. I've really never thought of it that way. We're like, okay, well, people who like romantic comedies and also like Harry Potters are probably going to like this. Let's do a test. Let's do a test ad, which you could do for $25, $35, $50, and just kind of test out your hypothesis.
And it was interesting. So we tested way at the beginning of the putting together the marketing materials, we did A/B test those two different demographic groups with our trailer, and we had exactly the same click-through rate from both groups, which was really interesting because we thought maybe we'd learn that one was stronger than the other and then target the film that way, and it actually came out totally evenly.
Really? That's interesting. So that's a good way for people listening is, well, you did market research prior to, like, you was trying to figure out how to do this by doing these kind of like little test Facebook ads and stuff like that. You're basically doing a lot of the stuff that I preach, which is fantastic, and how you're on the show. All right. So you had a very, so you had a niche audience. Go ahead.
So just to close the loop on the casting thing quickly. So because we had the feeling that was who our audience is, we then decided that it was important to get actors that had fan followings specifically in those groups of people.
So smart.
That aren't necessarily household names, but would be known to those people. So we really wanted a Harry Potter actor very much. And we ended up getting Christian Coulson, who played Tom Riddle in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. And then we got Naomi Grossman from American Horror Story. Perfect. And then Annie Golden from Orange is the New Black, which we figured
she's great.
Edgy feminist content. I mean, she's incredible.
Yeah.
So we tried to think about casting that.
So that is, again, what we preach. And it is so wonderful to see this because, look, if you made this movie for $50,000, you have less to risk, but you have $500,000, which is a substantial amount of money for an independent film. And you're being very smart so far. In this journey, I'm seeing it. You're being very smart and strategic on how you're doing this because, again, I've always said, like, if you're going to make a horror movie, you might not be able to afford Brad Pitt, but you might be able to afford Robert Englund to come out for a day or two, who has a huge horror following. And if you're doing something that's aimed at 80s horror, I mean, he's a dude that you would probably want to cast and probably affordable comparatively, to, obviously you can't get Brad Pitt or Meryl Streep or something like that. But they actually are larger in the niche that you're trying to.
Exactly. It's so we had two young women. We premiered at Cinequest in San Jose, California.
Yeah, so did I. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah, my first film was premiered at Cinequest. They're awesome.
I loved Cinequest. So we had that premiere. We had two young women drive 30 hours from Michigan to San Jose for that premiere because Christian Coulson tweeted about it. And then later they moved to North Carolina before we had a Brooklyn screening where Christian Coulson was going to be there. And they drove another 20 hours from North Carolina to be at that screening and meet Christian Coulson. Like, that is the kind of fan that you want.
Yeah, that's the kind of fans you want. And in all honesty, you can't do a film like this without that kind of strategy. Like, it's like if you just grab a whole bunch of friends or no-name actors or non-recognizable, non-marketable actors and try to do $500,000, which I've seen multiple times. It'll die on the vine. It just won't go there. So you have to do, this is like,
you need something.
You need some angle.
That's going to turn out the people.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. All right. So you finished making this movie. Now I'm assuming during this process, even during the making of this movie or prior to it, you're already thinking how you're going to distribute this thing, correct?
Yeah, we were. Although to be perfectly honest, so my first feature film, as I said, had gotten a distribution deal. Which at the time felt like, oh my God, and it was a theatrical, it was 10 city theatrical for a film.
And you're still counting the money that they keep sending you, right?
Well, yeah.
I mean, it must be tiring to swim in the gold coins like Scrooge McDuck. It must be rough.
So I will tell you exactly what happened with that movie. So we got a distribution deal, and we actually, I believe our distributor were honest people, which I think in and of itself is incredibly rare and lucky.
Shock.
But we have made to date, it came out in 2014, slightly less than $5,000 we have received from that.
From the whole movie, from everything.
From everything.
Jesus.
And to make matters worse, a year ago that company folded and got their titles got bought by another distribution company, which happens all of the time because these distribution companies are turning over like that. And that company has had our film since last August, so a full year, and we have not received a single report or check from them. Period. Despite the fact that we have emailed and called them multiple times, we had a lawyer contact them, like they just won't
Unless
back to us.
they're like, if you want it, sue us.
Yeah.
Basically,
Right.
when is the original contract up?
In 1 year.
Okay, and then it'll come back to you, and then you can do whatever you want with it.
Right. So thank God it was a short. I mean, it was a 6-year contract, which is relatively short.
It's relatively short. Anywhere between 5 to 7 is what I recommend. Which is not recommend, but it's just generally.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
You know, I literally just got a call from a filmmaker. It's like, yeah, this distribution company will not be named, but they offered a 15-year.
Yeah.
15-year deal with no money up front. With no money up front. So I'm like, oh, you're donating the film then. It's a donation. Yeah. It's a donation.
Right.
So there's a write-off. It's a write-off because you're never going to see a dime. Oh, and 100,000 P&A. Locked off at 100,000 P&A. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, are you kidding? Are you kidding? You'll never see a dime ever. It's predatory. These guys are predatory.
It's
disgusting.
So we made a docu-series about the tour, which we'll talk about in a while. But in the course of part of that docu-series was that we wanted to be radically transparent about our data and numbers and revenue and everything, because we feel like a huge problem in this space is that nobody has any information. So we're essentially all making dumb decisions because we don't have any information. So because we'd done that, a number of other filmmakers began reaching out to us who had gotten to traditional distribution deals and were willing to disclose to us what had happened, numbers wise. So we had a pair of filmmakers come on our series and talk about what happened, and it was
the abuse, the beating, yes.
Well, and like the thievery.
It's straight up.
And so then we had a lawyer contact us who spends a lot of time fighting this stuff, and he said, I mean, the whole phone call is in the episode, I'm crying by the end of the phone call because it's so horrifying what he told us.
Wow, I would like to talk to him.
You should totally talk to him.
I will.
I'll put you in touch with him.
We will talk afterwards because I really need to talk to him.
Yeah.
I've talked about distribution and the whole film entrepreneur model in general is about giving power to thinking about film as an entrepreneurial endeavor, thinking of your movie as a product and audiences and selling it and all that stuff, and to use traditional distribution as a partnership or as a hybrid part of the hybrid distribution model, where you still retain some sort of control and you don't get lost. I know Sundance winners with their movies that got lost in bankruptcies of distribution companies, and their rights are locked up for years, and by the time 6 years rolls around, no one cares about their Sundance winner movie anymore.
Right.
Well,
one of the filmmakers who came on our series to talk was, they didn't win Sundance, but they were at Sundance, which is, enough.
That's winning. That's winning.
Yeah. And they have received $0 back from their distribution company so far.
I mean, yeah, that's insane. Okay. So you we're going to get about the docuseries in a little bit. So your distribution plan, what was the idea like when you started going down this? Because I'm assuming you feel responsible to pay back these people and even possibly make a little money on this deal. So you, as a responsible filmmaker, were like, okay, guys, we've got $500,000. How are we going to make this back? What was the thought process there?
Yeah. So initially we started going down the same old path of applying to film festivals and wanting to be picked like Cinderella out of the masses, and sort of like
the lottery ticket mentality.
The lottery ticket.
Yeah.
And it's really 2 lottery tickets, right? You have to win the lottery of the film festivals to get into a major film festival where you can even be looked at seriously by distributors. And then you have to win the lottery again to actually get a distribution deal. Yeah.
So basically, and there's only 5, 6, 7 in the 5. US? 5. Yeah, there's 5 that matter.
Yep, absolutely.
And even then, even Sundance.
So I had somebody who's worked deeply in distribution tell me the other day off the record that she said, all these distribution companies tell filmmakers, don't worry if you don't get into one of the top film festivals, we still look at other festivals, whatever. She's like, that is bullshit. She's like, if the reality is, if you don't get into a top film festival, you are screwed. If you get into a top film festival, you are still probably screwed, but there is a tiny percentage of chance that you're not totally screwed.
Unless you go at it from a different point of view, like you are and what we talk about. Okay. Right. So, all right. So what was all right. So you went down the normal traditional path of trying Sundance. You submitted to Sundance.
You submitted to Sundance. You were not accepted to Sundance. It's not really a Sundance kind of movie.
But you did crowdfund with Seed and Spark, right?
We did, yeah.
Okay, so can we talk just quickly about, because I crowdfunded my first film on Seed and Spark, and I love Emily and I love what they're doing. They're fantastic. Yeah. And you crowdfunded this? How much did you raise when you crowdfunded?
We crowdfunded $35,000.
So that's a good amount. Yeah, that's a good amount without question. And then you got the investments for the rest. Mm-hmm. But you started to build an audience with them. Yeah, with Seed and Spark, and then Seed and Spark has their own kind of distribution output deal, like through their service, and they have a deal with Quiver and all that kind of stuff, right?
They don't have a deal with Quiver. We got to Quiver. Liz Manischel at Sundance.
Oh, of course, Liz. Yeah, she's a friend of the show.
We had gotten to the final rounds of being selected for their creative distribution lab, and they have a deal with Quiver that if you're a finalist, you get a discount.
Awesome.
So that's how
they were on the show. Did you a quick funny story about Liz? She called me and she's like, Alex, we have this distribution grant. We want to give filmmakers away, but we have like 15 people who've signed up. I need help. Can you get the word out? I'm like,
you're like, are you kidding?
Are you kidding me? Give me a minute. And then I put her on the show and I go, be careful what you wish for. And they were inundated. They had to shut it down. And I said, and they were foolish enough to leave their emails on the show. I'm like, don't. Oh, no. She's like, no, we don't mind. We want to help. I'm like, okay. And you're like, oh yeah. It was brutal. Yeah. That's awesome. All right. So you went down that road. So go ahead, continue.
Okay. So I would say we spent about, from like September to like Thanksgiving, sort of going down that path, having initial conversations with distributors and sales agents, and simultaneously sort of feeling our own souls dying by the just like sort of soulless horribleness of that process. Mm-hmm. And also, so I had that experience with my first feature film, and my producing partner, Sarah Wharton's past feature films had very similar experiences with traditional distributors. And like, we were just kind of getting like, it just began to feel like we were going to hand our film to a person who was going to throw it off a cliff again in exchange for a large percentage of our revenues. Like
you throw it up against the wall and see what sticks.
Right. And also, I think what was different this time too is at this current moment in film distribution, you can feel the despondency wafting off of the distributors themselves. Like, you're in these conversations and they're just like, well, we don't know what works. I love your movie and I have absolutely no idea how to sell it. Like, you can just feel the despair.
But I think also distributors have the same problem as independent filmmakers. It's they can't get above the noise. Like, there's certain bigger distributors. I mean, I'm not even talking about Lionsgate or the studios or anything like that. I'm talking about just like even bigger indie distributors' names. These guys, they just basically pump it out through their outlets. So they'll put it on iTunes, Amazon. Yeah. They might make a Redbox deal if you're lucky. Maybe they'll do a limited theatrical if it has some sort of maybe. Maybe they'll get Netflix or Hulu to buy it. They'll submit it, but they just basically shotgun it. They don't really have a plan, and it's almost impossible for a distributor without major money to distribute to get any sort of awareness for a film. Even if you dump $5 or $10 million into P&A, that still means that's nothing.
Totally, and yeah, there is no doubt that we are in a profound distribution crisis right now across the board. Like, it's not like it's a distributor's, not that piece of it is not the distributor's fault, but in that landscape, I feel like it makes the prospect of going with a distributor even worse because like they're just like flinging stuff out and nothing's working.
Because
right
they're basically, I hate to use the term blockbuster, but then don't be blockbuster. That's what that is. They got fat. This is the way it's always been. And then when Netflix showed up and offered Blockbuster to buy them for $50 million, and Blockbuster said, "No, kid, we're fine."
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
We're good on this video store thing. We don't need your DVD home sale thing, whatever you're doing. But that's where these old school distribution companies are coming from. They have no idea how to handle the new landscape, and it's changing daily. It's insane.
Yeah, it's insane. Right. So, so in the middle of that mess, there came a moment around Thanksgiving where we were just like, we just looked at each other and we were like, we're not doing this again. This is horrible and not going to work. And this movie is too good. We have too much money on the line. We're just not, nope, we're not doing it. So we started, I had a dream, actually, literally is what happened.
Yes, MLK, yes.
I had a dream that we were driving around the country in an RV on something called the Joyful Vampire Tour of America, releasing the movie.
You had a dream? You literally physically had a dream.
I literally had a dream that was happening.
That's so amazing. That's so amazing.
And I called Sarah the next morning and I was like, this might be crazy, but what if we just rented an RV and did the Joyful Vampire Tour of America? And God bless her, she was like, yes, and we should put fangs on it.
That's awesome. You see, this is the audacity I was talking about.
Yes.
This is what I love about this story.
So in last December, I had this dream, and we basically started calling everybody that we knew within the industry and sounding out this idea.
That didn't go well, I'm sure. Nothing will signal how giant a crisis the industry is in, as basically everybody's response was, well, nothing else is working. You may as well try it. Wow. That says volumes.
Right. One woman read us the riot act about how we were throwing our careers off the cliff, but truly.
I'm sure.
It took a while for that phone call, and when it finally happened, I was like, oh, this is finally happening.
Okay, good. We are crazy. I mean, everyone can't agree with this. This is insane.
But everybody else was just like, we don't know, probably try it. So we decided around Christmas that we were going to do this, and then we had from January to May to put together the tour. And the basic thinking behind the tour was, okay, if the hurdle is that it's really hard to get people to leave their houses now to watch a movie because you have infinite content from your sofa, then you have to offer people an extra reason to do it.
Yes.
So we thought a piece of that is certainly having the filmmaker be there, being able to do a Q&A after people meet the filmmaker, get to talk about the movie. But we felt like there needed to be another element that wasn't quite enough. So we came up with the idea that we would throw a joyful vampire ball after every screening.
Excellent.
And that we would invite the audience to come dressed in costume to the screening and the party.
And if I may stop you for a second, and if you understand your niche, which you guys definitely do understand your niche, that audience would love to dress up and go to a ball.
Oh, yes. Right. And funnily enough, the desire to dress in costume and wound up expanding way beyond our niche audience. Like, it turns out that most adults just looking for an excuse to wear a costume. Fun fact.
Fun fact for everyone listening out there.
Yeah.
People just want to dress up.
Yeah. So that was the concept. And then we ran some back of the napkin math and quickly understood that we could not physically make back anything close to the budget from the tour itself, because I had 3 months that I could physically go on this tour. So we had to do a 3-month tour, and okay, you can't do a screening every night or you'll die. So maybe initially we thought we'd do 20 to 30 screenings over that time, count the seats. The most you can make is $40,000. So
but that's just from ticket sales. That doesn't
ticket
include other
Yes.
streams of revenue.
Exactly. Right. So we decided quickly that the model that we were going to test was to use the tour to drive online sales. So we got the film transactionally on iTunes, Amazon, and Google Play, and then we did a partnership with Seed and Spark so that they would help us market the tour. And so the film was available for subscription on demand through Seed and Spark, which was worth it to us because if they're your only subscription platform, they pay 40 cents per minute watched of your movie.
Oh, that's amazing.
Which is bananas, which means that you make more money if somebody watches it on Seed and Spark than even if they buy a ticket.
Wow. I wonder how that business, I have to call Emily. What's that business model working? Like, how are you doing?
I think the only explanation I can come up with is that they're artificially inflating it at the beginning of their model to try to attract filmmakers, and then eventually that will go down. But
like Amazon did.
Yeah, but I'm
did.
happy to reap the benefits in the meantime.
Fair enough. Okay, so and then what are the other revenue streams that you were able to create on this tour?
So merchandise was the major one. So and because of the nature of the film, we felt like we just had a merchandise sort of extravaganza.
Of course.
Waiting for us. So
but also don't forget, and I hate to interrupt you again, but that this audience is known for purchasing stuff like Comic-Con, geeks, mega nerds. This is what they love to do. Right. So they love to dress up and they love to buy stuff.
Great audience.
Great audience to go to Target. So I'm stopping you every once in a while so everyone hears and understands what the mentality and the process is, because you guys you're basically hitting every note. So far as a film entrepreneur, you're hitting every note so far. You're hitting every note. Okay.
So we had DVDs and Blu-rays print made up. We had posters. We had very nice enamel pins. We had 2 kinds of T-shirts. One that was the film's, and one we had a very funny Love Sucks
design. So okay, and I'll stop there. I'll stop there one more time. Is that now you understand your niche audience, and you're creating not only merchandise off your movie, but you're also creating merchandise that audience would like, that is kind of related to your movie, but not directly related. So like the Love Sucks T-shirt is just something that people who like vampires would probably buy.
Right. And yes, and that design, one of the characters wears that T-shirt in the movie, but
but then you see again, now you're product placing your movie. Oh my God. You're you're so hitting all the dots. Oh my God, I love this. I'm so glad I have you on the show. All right, so continue.
Okay, so we had hoodies, we had mugs. We had 3 different designs of mugs. And I think that's it.
And then you sold at every event, you would sell merch. And how much revenue did you generate from all the merch through the whole tour, give or take?
I believe $9,000.
Okay, so that's a nice. Hey, I'll take it if it's on the floor.
Absolutely.
It's a nice chunk of change. Why not? Yeah. Okay, great. So now, and then what other revenue sources did you create? The ball. How did that process work?
So the balls, we ended up deciding. So the way it ended up working with venues and the balls is some venues, the screening and the ball would be at the same venue. So the whole evening would take place, and generally there was only one ticket price, and it was for the whole thing, and those tickets tended to be more expensive.
Right.
Some venues were more traditional theaters, and they either didn't have the space or wouldn't let us do the ball at that venue. So in those cases, we would have the screening and then move everybody to who wanted to come to a separate venue, usually like a local bar or something, for the ball.
Okay.
And in those places, generally, we didn't charge extra for the ball. We ended up deciding that it was more worth it to have the people come and meet us and be engaged and buy merchandise. Like the longer they hang out, the drunker they get, the more merchandise they're going to buy. So that's a plus. We just didn't feel, and particularly because in those situations, we would be doing them often at bars where other people were present. It became kind of complicated to be able to, it didn't feel like something we could really charge for. If I did this again, when I do this again, I would always do it in venues where I could do the whole evening in one place. It didn't really work very well when you had to move people. And then I would charge more for the whole experience. So quite often at these events, my husband was always working the merchandise. My very, very nice husband who moved into an RV for 3 months to test a distribution model.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Would always work the merch table. And quite often people would come up to him and give him cash donations towards the film as they left the theater. Nice. Which was really interesting. I mean, totally unsolicited. Obviously, we weren't asking for donations. But what that signaled to us is that people consistently felt like they had gotten more value than they had paid for. So that they would have paid more money for the experience that they got.
What was the cost? What was the cost for the ball and the ticket for the movie?
A lot of places we were hamstrung by what the movie theater normally charged for movies. So some places it was like $7 or $8. Whenever we could control it, we charged usually $20 for the movie plus the ball.
Oh, that's so cheap, though. I mean, are you kidding? Right. That's so cheap. Right. You could have easily charged $50, $60, $70 easily. Yeah,
we wanted to test it and see. I think in the future I would charge more.
Yeah, because you're creating an experience. You're creating an event. Like even if you go to a bar, sometimes the cover is going to be $20. Sure. Like there's ways of you could have.
We definitely lowballed it with the feeling that we were really testing a model, and we needed to it was something that people weren't going to be used to attending. It wasn't really a concept that audiences were going to understand. So we had to kind of make the bar for entry pretty low.
Got it. All right. So when it's all said and done, what were the rough numbers coming in from the tour?
So from ticket sales, I think it came in at about 17,000.
Okay. And that includes balls?
Yeah.
Okay.
About 17,000 from ticket sales, which we could have, I think, had we sold out every venue, we would have made about 40,000, I think. Mm-hmm. But we were marketing 51 screenings in 90 days with a very small team.
Sure. And then, that was my next question. How did you actually put asses in seats? Like what, because that's a lot of marketing.
That's a lot of, right. Yes. So, we tried everything. So we did a lot of paid Facebook ads, both to drive online sales and then also to drive people to screenings. Mm-hmm. So we would target people in a specific geographic area, drive them to screening. And the geographic targeting ads worked shockingly well. I thought those wouldn't work at all. But consistently at screenings, people came because they saw an ad on Facebook. One lady drove 4 hours to see it in costume because she saw an ad on Facebook, which I find shocking.
Well, oddly, because there's not a lot of places you can dress up as a vampire, and without being scoffed at, and go there. So you really, I think you left some money on the table, if I may.
No, we did. But the other thing is we went in blind. We had no information because there's no information. So there are 100 things I would do differently next time. And part of the reason we were doing the docu-series is so that now other people can have our information and do better with next time. So we did the paid Facebook ads. In almost every place, we had a local host whose job was to help hustle their friends, help hang posters around town.
A street team,
yes.
Got it.
So they were crucial. I would say that was probably the most effective means of getting people into seats. So we with Seed and Spark, we ran surveys about this. So we would have people sign up via text for our email list in the theater after the screening, which everybody should do. This worked incredibly well. Mm-hmm. And then the first email they would get would have a survey asking them to tell us like why they had come to the film and where they'd heard about it and all this stuff. And so the top reason by far was hearing about it from a friend who was not involved in the film. So either word of mouth or a local host. And then the next three tied reasons were paid Facebook ads, hearing about it from a friend who was involved in the film, and hearing about it from the venue.
Interesting.
And then everything else, like there was hardly anything else that even ranked on that scale. I mean, we did a lot of other stuff. So we did have physical posters hung around most of the town, not just at the theaters, but like around the communities. We had a very active social media life, even outside of the paid ads, which was effective. We did Facebook event pages, which I do think were quite effective. We targeted local grassroots we used grassroots methods to target local organizations. So anything involving women in film, we would reach out to them. Anything and any local film groups we would reach out to. Any local vampire clubs, any local D&D clubs, any LARPing groups, any Harry Potter clubs. There are a shocking number of Harry Potter clubs around the country. We would reach out to them.
Did you do any conventions? Like, did you show up at any conventions?
We did. We were invited to play at SpikeCon in Utah, which we did, which was awesome. I think playing more cons is going to be part of the next leg of our strategy. But we only played one on the tour itself. Okay.
So, all right. So, and then you obviously were thinking about developing ancillary products during the movie, obviously, because you had people wearing t-shirts and you're already thinking about ancillary products. So that was part of your strategy as well. Like, we're going to sell merch. We're going to sell some merch on this. Like this is before the tour, you were thinking of selling merch.
Yeah, I think that was always in our minds.
Okay.
Although again, we thought we would go down a more traditional path. Like I think we were thinking we were helping set up a distributor to do a good job, and then
right. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. For people who are listening, you just see my face like a distributor did. Like my face said everything. I was like, yeah, right. Like setting. That's such an indie filmmaker thing to say. We all do. It's like I'm going to set them up properly to do a good job. Like they don't care. No. So now that you've done this tour, that you were trying to drive digital sales, did it drive digital sales, and do you have any sort of numbers with that?
Well, so here is the giant problem with these digital platforms: is they don't tell you for 3 to 6 months. They don't give you any numbers for 3 to 6 months. So unlike any other normal marketing thing, I mean, like with selling tickets on the road, we were able to very much adjust our tactics as we went, as we learned and saw what was happening every night, and you just don't know. So that is a huge problem. So we will definitely make those numbers public once we have them, but we don't have them yet.
And then you were talking a little earlier about the next leg. What are you doing? How are you continuing this audacity of a journey?
Well, so the tour ended 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
And we've all been in a bit of a coma. We all gave ourselves permission to be in a coma more or less since then. So we don't have an exact plan yet. We're going to start putting that together next month. But some things that we're definitely going to do, start getting on the con circuit more aggressively. We have somebody who's helping us with foreign sales. We've had a lot of interest from international territories for the film.
So how are you processing that? Are you doing that through a sales agent, or are you going to an international distributor?
Well, I don't know yet. So we have an Australian sales agent who I met through a friend, and is like an actually trustworthy human being, unlike most sales agents. And so she has very generously offered to help us sort of like suss out what the best way to go is. She wanted to wait till the end of the tour so that we had our materials. So one of the big advantages to the tour, outside just the revenue we earned from the tour, is that we now have video testimonials of people in costumes all over the country talking about how much they love the film, how their favorite film. It's like so we have our documentary filmmaker who was with us making the docu-series is putting together a sizzle reel for us that we can now send with our trailer to distributors. We're going to go, holy shit, they ended up getting, like, they got people to come out in costume to watch this movie.
But you're in the distributors with international. I'm assuming you're not going to you're not going to give them domestic.
No, not domestic, internationally.
Internationally. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then you're just going to try to go territory. Are you going to go to AFM or anything like that to see if you can do anything?
I think we might try to go to AFM, yeah.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
Okay. If you're there, we'll have coffee. I'll be there. Okay. No, I'll be there.
Okay.
Have you ever been?
Yeah. I've never been, no.
Oh, prepare yourself. It's an interesting place. Let's just put it that way. I went one year and the biggest movie of the year was Steven Seagal versus Mike Tyson in a movie. And then, of course, you need to watch that movie because I want to know who wins. But that's the kind of place it is.
Yeah.
It's a unique place.
Yeah. Speaking of soul crushing. And then I think eventually we will try to make a deal with one of the streaming platforms. I think the feedback we've been getting is that the good thing about the streaming platforms at this particular moment is that there are all these new ones coming to the market in the next 6 months. And
they're all looking.
So it is actually a little bit more of a seller's marketplace right now than it has been with streaming platforms.
Okay. And I'm assuming did you submit to Netflix and Hulu yet or not yet?
I am.
Not yet. Okay. All right. I mean, you guys you are hustlers. You are indie film hustlers. You're film entrepreneurs. You are hustling it. You're keeping going. Yeah. You see, most filmmakers would have just said, well, that was the end of the tour. We're done. But you're like, no. As we continue this journey.
We haven't made the money back yet. And I think, like, part of this experiment to me is to try to figure out, like, is there a market, like, is it possible to make back
$500,000
money on indie films right now? Mm-hmm. And the answer may be no. And if the answer is no, because to speak about digital sales for a second, we don't have the final numbers, but I have a niggling feeling that we may have reached a moment where people are simply unwilling to pay even $2.99 for a movie.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, the future is AVOD. That's the future. I mean, I know filmmakers making a ton more on AVOD than they are on SVOD or TVOD.
Right.
Without question.
Yes. So also airlines. We're going to try to make some airline deals.
Airlines, cruise lines. The church is not so much with the vampire movie, but
not play very well
unless they're vampire churches.
So I now suspect that our revenue model was wrong. That the tour will not have driven transactional sales in the way that we needed it to. Mm-hmm. But I think we have to look really into the abyss here as filmmakers and say, like, is it possible at any budget level? If it isn't, what does that mean? And maybe the answer is that, like, you just have to make very micro budget films, or the answer is that, like a lot of the arts, that the goal isn't actually to make money, it's to make impact, and that ceases to be the goal.
As long as the budget justify
as long as the budget. But then, as long as you are completely upfront about that with your
investors. If everyone understands that, like, look, we're making art here, and this is an art exhibition, and we're going to put it out there, and this is the way it is. Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I'm in the trenches here every day, in the indie film trenches. So the answer is yes, you can make your money back, and that's what the whole film entrepreneur model is about. It's about rethinking how you do it. Could this movie, if you would have made this movie for $100,000, which is it's still a decent budget, $100,000, you would be very close to making your money back, more unlikely. So it's always about the budget and keeping that overhead low, or whatever. There's always that balance of like, if I spend $1 million, well, what do I need to do to get that $1 million back? And vice versa. So if this, for argument's sake, if this movie would have cost $50,000, the tour would have been great. Right? The tour would have been great.
Well, except,
give or take. I mean, you're not going to make all the money back on the tour, but you would be really close, and even on just merch sales, you would have done pretty well. I mean, obviously costs and stuff like that, but yeah.
Right. So, but I have to say that, and obviously the money is important, obviously. However, there is another bottom line here, which is impact. And I have never felt as an artist like my work was having greater impact than on this tour, ever. It was astonishing to travel the country and go to Vicksburg, Mississippi and Wichita, Kansas, and like these places that I have never been and show my movie and talk to people afterwards, many of whom had never met a filmmaker before. Like, I feel like in New York and Los Angeles, we forget actually what a big deal that is. Because if you can find a screening without a filmmaker in attendance, it's like amazing. But like in Vicksburg, they had never met a filmmaker before. For them, it was like, I may as well have been Steven Spielberg, Right. And I had this one really fascinating dialogue with a woman in Columbus, Ohio, who my film lovingly pokes fun at Christians, but this woman what took great affront to that and came barreling up to me afterwards and was very hurt about the fact that I'd made fun of Christians. And I said, I'm so sorry you feel that way. And we had a really extended conversation about the concept of comedy and punching up versus punching down and sort of like, and at the end of it, she was like, well, it felt really great to be able to say that to a filmmaker because normally nobody hears my responses to movies. And I was like, that is awesome. And the idea, my dream now is that if we could get like an Oregon Trail of filmmakers doing these tours and bringing independent films to parts of the country that do not see independent film, that have no access to anything in an in-person setting other than the Avengers, and they could meet and have these dialogues with filmmakers of all different backgrounds and perspectives, that would change the country. It would.
It would, and I would agree with you on that. And I think that the future of independent film, you're going to need to do a lot more work. So I think that's gonna thin out the herd, if you will, because there's not many filmmakers that I know who want to get into an RV for 3 months, put some fangs on it, and travel the country. There just isn't, and that's what it's going to take. It's going to take thinking about movies differently. It's going to think about, how can I create other revenue streams from this film? Is the film a loss leader where I made the film for $100,000, but I'm really making money on these online courses or books or, depending on the subject matter, all this kind of stuff. It's about thinking about it differently. I do believe there's a space for us, but I think we're going to turn into more carnies, where I think that you've got to provide a service that the studios can't.
Exactly.
Period. Right. And what you were able to do, the studio, there's no Avengers ball.
No.
Now they also made $2 billion, so they don't care because that's not what their business model is. But for us, the scrappy independent filmmaker, the film entrepreneur, we got to figure out other ways to make it happen. And I always look at this whole process as the creative process. The movie is just one part of this entire, from casting to creating product lines to doing this tour. This is all creative. And
absolutely.
And has to become part of the dialogue and has to become part of this process. Yeah. Because you can't just drop off to a distributor, like as we very much have said, clearly have said in this episode.
Right. And so many filmmakers, both before the tour and during the tour, was like, well, I think it's really awesome what you're doing, but like, I would never want to do all that work. And like,
well then,
but to me, and which I have sympathy for on the one hand, but on the other hand, why are we making movies if no one's going to see them? And B, I'm with you. Like I loved being on the tour, like I'm a filmmaker getting to show my film to people 51 times and listen to them laugh and have them come and cut. Like it was the greatest I mean, it's one of the greatest periods of my life.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And, you're not the first film to ever go on a road show. There's many have done it before, and there's many that will do it after. It's creating a business model that can sustain the art. Because, as I say, the word show and there's the word business, and the word business has twice as many letters as the word show. And there's a reason for that, because without the business, there is no show. And as much impact as you want to make, wouldn't it be better to make a film that you can not only make your money back, but everyone gets paid?
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
You get a little bit of profit, and you could do it again and again and again and again. And if you control everything and you create your own portfolio where you have actual revenue streams and not like, maybe you'll get a report.
Right.
That's the future.
Right.
That's the future.
Absolutely. And I think the key pathway to that future is more films being willing to offer themselves as as radically transparent case studies, because a filmmaker within their lifetime is not going to make enough films to crack the model based on their own experimentation. Mm-hmm. And so we have to be honest with each other, even when we fail, we just have to, because then we will figure it out. Because I'm with you. I believe there is a model out there, but we don't know what it is right now. That's for damn sure.
I mean, the model that has worked for me is doing ultra micro budget movies that have a good production value, that are aimed at a niche audience. And you control everything. And, my first film cost me $5,000 to make. And I sold it to Hulu, and I sold it internationally, and I drove sales, but I have a platform. And I was able to build off that. And there's audience building, and there's that whole conversation we never even got into. But that is a possibility. If I would have made that movie for 50 or $100,000, I don't know. Probably would have been another statistic. So it's a weird balance. It's a wonderful and an extremely dangerous time for being an independent filmmaker, because there's more access than ever before, but the competition is it's crushing. It really is.
I would say the noise more than the competition.
Yeah.
I feel like it would feel differently if it was just like such great work was being made, and you were like up against and you were losing out to films that like blew your mind, and that doesn't feel. But sometimes you see those films, but it's sort of the noise.
But also with that said, the competition is not just films; it's amazing television. Oh, yeah. I mean, the television that's coming out right now is where a lot of independent filmmakers are going, because and you're competing for that hour. Oh yeah, you're going to watch,
and phones and video games,
social media, and a million other things. So there's just a lot of competition for eyeballs. I'm curious.
But what's interesting again about that? So my hypothesis going into the tour was that you could maybe salvage the in-person experience as long as you relied on online viewing for money. And I actually think it's the reverse, because the number of people that came up to me and said, like, this is the first meaningful human interaction I've had with strangers in months. And like the hunger of people it is harder to get them out of their houses for sure. But once they're there, you can give them like borderline religious experiences with very little effort, but the simple act of putting them in a room and giving them context to interact with other people.
Yeah, it is the future. It is the future. I think this is a model that can work. I think at a certain budget range, it could work without question. I think at this budget range, it will work, but it's going to take longer. It's going to be harder hustling, and it's an experiment. You guys are really, and your investors must be really cool people.
They're really cool people.
They're extremely cool people.
And we did ask them, like we explained, but the other thing is like, okay, so I think you're right. I think there's money that we probably left on the table. Are we whole? No. But are we better off than if we had gotten a distribution deal?
Yes.
You bet we are.
You have money.
We have money.
Something.
Actual money.
You actually got some money.
We made more in the first week of ticket sales from the tour than I made for my entire first feature film from a distributor.
Correct. Done.
So.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that pretty much says everything you need to say. So as a business person, as you know, you have to look at like, okay, well, what cost does that potential revenue justify? And it's like you got to look at it as developing any widget. Keep the cost as low as possible by still maintaining as high quality as possible to be able to create a marketable product.
Right.
You know, and then also art. You know, it's we're a very unique, strange business. You know, we're the only business that says we're going to invest $1 million into something that we kind of maybe figure maybe there'll be some way we'll make our money back. Like that's
and has no inherent value. That's value will be decided financially upon completion.
Right, because this has
some random people.
Right. This has a value.
Yeah.
This phone has a value, and it costs X amount, and it has this X amount of value attached to it. A movie, I mean, The Room, you know, the movie The Room, which is considered one of the worst movies of all time, has a specific value attached to it.
Right.
Is it better produced than your film? No. Is it better produced than most films? No. But
is it more profitable? Yes.
Absolutely. Tommy Wiseau is a millionaire off of this movie because of the perceived value of that film. Right. So it's such a crazy thing.
Well, which is crazy as a business, and it's also the only art form that is expected to make money. Like no other art form is
really, you're right,
is expected to make money.
Right, exactly. But because the value, the cost is so high. The cost is so high to create our art, you know, and there's so many, and it's a collaborative art. So it's not even one person, it's a collaborative art. So now you've got to deal with all of that and the politics and the personalities.
What are we doing?
Well, this is what I came up with basically an idea of why we are as insane as we are. And you are literally a carny. I mean, you literally went on the road and put up a tent and put a show on and packed it up and moved it to the next town. Yeah. So, I mean, I always consider us carnies, but I think, we have to get ourselves checked out for celluloid because we might have a bad case of filmmaking. And I think, and I think once we get bitten, there's no vaccine. Like you're done. You're it's over. And to be a little bit more crass, it's kind of like herpes because it's dormant a lot of times, but it flares up and it's with you for life.
True. Well, and like even in the worst day on tour, I would go into that theater and listen to an audience full of people laughing at the jokes I had written, and I was like, "I'm good. I'm done. Like I have to do this for the rest of my life. There's nothing else I can do.
Don't even need money. I'm fine." We're insane. We're insane. But if we understand our insanity, and if we are self-aware enough of what we're doing, because a lot of filmmakers are not. A lot of filmmakers are delusional. Trust me, I know. I was very delusional for many years of my career. I'm sure you might have had a few years of delusion as well. But if we're self-aware enough, and then we actually become smart about how we can actually create our art and make a business out of our art, and then create other revenue streams to support us while we're making our art to the point where we're able to eventually do this full time, that's the dream. And I think also a lot of filmmakers have this whole, I need to make $1 million and I have to work in the studio system and I have to do all like that dream that Hollywood's been selling us since the 90s. If I'm able to make money that pays my rent and puts food on my table for my family, and I'm able to provide a service, which is entertainment or some other service that I'm providing my audience, isn't that the dream? Like
for me, it is. Yeah.
Right. It's like, I don't need billions of dollars. You know, I don't. I'm happy.
But
now.
I do need to be able to pay my rent. And I think that's
and pay your people.
We're still not quite there. Yeah.
Right. Pay your rent, pay your people that work with you on this, and the crazy people that you con into doing, going on these crazy journeys with us as filmmakers. Yeah. But
I mean, I do think there's something to the Duplass model for sure of very low, keeping the cost low up front by giving everybody a piece of the back end with the touring model. Because one thing, so I will say that having the name actors did help to a certain extent, but Naomi Grossman, who was one of them, hustled her took us off for us and like got every cousin she has to come out to a screening and got every person she knows in every city. And she put more butts in seats, not because she's famous, but because she like hounded people to come. And for that reason, she was the most valuable actor. And I think actually, if if you had a whole team of filmmakers actively hounding people in cities because they were going to get a piece of the back end, we would have sold more tickets than we sold because we had famous actors.
Yeah, there's multiple different business models, and I think the Duplass brothers have been able to. They cracked the code. I mean, the Duplasses cracked the code a while ago, and if you remember their first films, they were made for nothing.
Right.
And I
mean, they're also friends with famous people, which again, like,
but now,
right now, yeah,
not when they were starting out.
Right.
When they did Puffy Chair. They had Sundance because they got the short film the year before, but it took them a minute before those famous people friends.
Yeah.
We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor. And now back to the show.
And now they can leverage everything that they have. But you know the whole Marvel story with them, right? Have you heard that story?
Mm-mm.
Marvel called the Duplasses and they offered them a movie and they turned it down. Because they said, it's just not us. And that is self-awareness. And that is a clear understanding of what is important to you as a filmmaker. They said, look, we would be locked up for 3 years and it would have been fun maybe, but it's kind of like, we don't want to do that. Like we want to make other films. We want to employ our friends. We want to go out and tell the stories we want to tell. Like why would we lock ourselves up for this kind of film? Like we're good. We're making Netflix movies. We're making Netflix shows. We're doing HBO shows. Like, I'm good.
Yeah.
I don't need that. And and every filmmaker that hears the story, many of them are like, you're crazy. I'm like, I said, no, he knows. And they both know exactly what's important to them.
Right.
And I think that's where we all have to be. Now, I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all of my filmtrepreneur guests. What advice would you give a filmtrepreneur starting a project today?
Liberate yourselves from the system.
The Matrix. Unplug
get out
from
of
the
Matrix.
Unplug from the Matrix.
Keep the red pill, because from the beginning. Because the other thing that if we had known from day one of making Bite Me that this is what we're going to do, we would have done things differently, and we would have been able to set ourselves up so much more successfully.
Very good. Now, what is the biggest lesson you've learned going through this audacity of this tour, this project, where you are? What's the biggest lesson you've learned so far?
The system is a lie.
The Matrix is a lie.
Why? It's true. I just can't tell you how many things people said to us, like, well, you're never going to get theaters to agree to this.
Well, they will.
So many theaters said yes that we had to cap the tour at 51 screenings. Like that was not they're just the idea that film festivals are the be all end all.
No.
When in reality, they're eating up your profits realistically.
Right. Of course.
It's a lie. So think differently.
Think differently. Okay, perfect. Yes. Like Apple says, think different. Back in the day. Now, what did you learn? What have you learned from your biggest filmmaking or business failure? Like that first movie. Besides, don't sign with the traditional distributor.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's the same answer again. That the decision to give your film to a distributor is the last decision you get to make with that film, basically.
Wow. That's great.
Whereas whatever mistakes or successes we had with this tour, we now get to make an infinite number of decisions next.
Do you see yourselves partnering strategically with a traditional distributor, like carving out certain rights, like actually doing a real partnership if you found good distributors? Because I have,
sure.
Like if
but it's so hard to know. I mean, this is the problem. Like they all sound great up front, and then, but yeah, I mean, of course, like if the right opportunity came along, I think particularly internationally, it makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. It just all depends. It all depends because there are models out there. There are distribution companies that I work with that can do good stuff. But I would agree, like if you just sign everything over, if you can try to, like I'm going to keep the DVD rights. I have the rights to sell it on my website. Something. That's a huge thing. Like if all hell breaks loose, I can still sell it on my website. I could put it on Vimeo Plus and sell it.
Right.
If worse comes to worse. Now, what is the lesson that took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
The system is a lie.
No. Okay.
It's so hard because you grow up watching the Oscars and and then everybody talks about Sundance and it's like it feels
magical,
so true, and it just isn't. And it's so hard. I feel like I've had to learn that lesson over and over and over again.
Okay. Now, in your opinion, what is the definition of a filmtrepreneur?
I think a filmmaker who understands that their job does not end when the picture is locked.
That's a great definition. It's a great definition. I love that. Now, where can people find out more about you, about Bite Me, about everything you're doing?
Well, I have a website.
What? Shocking.
It's 2019. NaomiMcDougallJones.com.
It's not GeoCities? Sorry. Is it on AOL? No, I'm joking.
Yeah. Maybe. How does that AOL work?
Exactly.
BiteMeTheFilm.com is our film's website. I would very much encourage people to watch our docu-series, which is on YouTube. You just search for The Joyful Vampire Tour of America. It's 12 episodes. It was made by Kiwi Callahan. It's incredibly funny and fun, just as like an adventure story of us living in an RV for 3 months, traveling around the country, but also we pull our pants all the way down and everything. So if I had that tool as a filmmaker 6 months ago, my life would be different.
Wow. That's awesome. Naomi, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I'm so glad we were able to finally get together and make this happen. And I do hope that this episode really educates some people out there and really inspires some people to do something, and also terrifies some people, because it ain't easy out here. It isn't easy. And like you said, the filmmaker who understands that their job is not done at final cut is a really great definition of a film entrepreneur, because you've got to think about other things and you got to look at things differently, as you so wonderfully put. So thank you again so much for being so candid and dropping some knowledge bombs and inspirational bombs on the tribe today.
Thank you so much for having me.
That was an epic interview. Naomi, thank you again so much for not only being on the show, but for everything you're doing for filmmakers with that amazing series, which, by the way, the series is available on Indie Film Hustle TV. So anybody who has membership to Indie Film Hustle TV, you can watch the entire series there as part of your membership. It's also available on YouTube as well. But I will put links to all of that in the show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/342. I'll also put links to the movie and where to buy it, rent it, see it, and support this amazing group of filmmakers who are trying to make it happen for not only themselves, but to help the community as well. And I'm always behind any filmmaker who is willing to be so open-minded and completely transparent about their process of trying to make money in this insane business. So thanks again, Naomi, for coming on the show. Now, if you haven't already, and if you really like the show, it really mean a lot to me if you head over to filmmakingpodcast.com. It'll take you straight to Apple Podcasts. Subscribe, leave a review. It really helps the show out a lot. It really, really, really appreciate it. And I have a little bit of update on that book, The Rise of the Filmtrepreneur. It is about a week away from me delivering it to my editor and getting everything ready for our October release. So I will keep you up to date on that. All I'm going to tell you guys is this. This book is going to blow the lid off this business. I mean, I go buck wild on the business in this book. I really, really do. It is an eye-opening book that tells a lot of truth bombs and a lot of hard realities about this business, but also gives you a blueprint on how you can actually make a business out of your filmmaking, out of your films, and to be able to build an actual business around what you love to do. So if you want to, again, pre-order that book, head over to filmbizbook.com. That's filmbizbook.com, which will take you straight to Amazon, where you could pre-order the book to be the first to get it. Thank you again so much. This has been a crossover edition with the Filmtrepreneur Podcast. Of course, if you haven't gone to the Filmtrepreneur Podcast, please head over to filmbizpodcast.com. That's filmbizpodcast.com. That takes you to the Filmtrepreneur Podcast. It is growing very, very fast, and it's getting a lot of great reviews. A lot of tribe members are heading over there. It's a lot of great, great information. New episode every single week. So thanks again for listening, guys. And as always, keep that hustle going. Keep that dream alive. And I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.